Good morning, everyone. We are live. I welcome you all to our event, and let us wait just a couple of minutes for everyone to join. Okay, I see how the virtual room is filling up. I hope you are all here with us. You can hear us, you can see us. If there are any problems, please give us a signal in the Q&As. But I will give you just one more minute so that we can start with everyone in our virtual room. Okay, so it's 2 minutes past 11, and I will just slowly start our today's event, our cooperation event between TÜV SÜD and the Women in Green Hydrogen. My name is Ekaterina Böning. I work as a Senior Policy Manager at Transport and Environment, but today I'm here in my different role. I'm here as the Head of External Relations of Women in Green Hydrogen, and you will hear about our network just in a minute. So today you probably noticed that our panel is only female experts today. And I'm very proud to moderate this discussion today, to be part of this event, because I don't know how it is for you. For me, it's the first time that I'm at an event talking about hydrogen with women only. So I welcome you all, and I hope you will enjoy this discussion with us. I hope you will gain some insights into the topic. And before we begin with our event, I would like to give you some technical instructions. So you are all on mute to reduce the background noise during the event. But of course, you are welcome to interact with us by using the Q&A function at the top right on your screen. So please free to ask questions to our keynote speakers, to our panelists, and we will try to make sure that as many of your questions will be responded to. One important note is also that the recording will be, that the event is being recorded and it will be also made available later. We have a great agenda for you today. We will start with a statement by my colleague Charlotte about women in green hydrogen, and then we will begin with the content-related discussion of our event today. We will have 2 keynotes on hydrogen certification, and later we will start with the panel discussion. So I would like to introduce you Charlotte Hussey, who is the founder of Women in Green Hydrogen, and she's also an expert on politics and hydrogen at the German Organization for International Cooperation. My dearest colleague, without any further ado, I pass the floor over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm still waiting for slides. I'm very, very happy also to welcome you all to this very special event. I will give now a very quick input on women in green hydrogen. I think everybody who joins this call is really eager to learn a lot about hydrogen certification, so I don't want to spend too much time on our organization, but I think for everybody who doesn't know it or wants to get the newest updates on women in green hydrogen, I'm very happy to give a quick introduction. Women in Green Hydrogen, just in general, is a network organization that was founded by me and also 9 other great women who work in the hydrogen sector around a year ago. We were all, I don't want to call it but we all attended many conferences in the hydrogen sector, and what we saw was that even though we knew many women working in the field, there were not many women that we saw on panels, that we saw in decision-making, gremia, and so on. So I started reaching out, as I said, around a year ago to women that I knew from the sector, asking them if they were willing and if they had interest to found something like a network of women in green hydrogen together. And what can I say? The return and the interest was so immense and so overwhelming that we all said, okay, let's do it together. And this was when the idea of women in green hydrogen was born. In November last year, we launched our website. We also launched our LinkedIn group. And on the next slide, we can see how we have grown ever since. So we are in the network more than 1,400 women already from all over the world. We have more than 700 newsletter subscribers. And we have also one of our main products is our expert database. I will come to this in a minute. We have more than 400 experts that have joined this expert database, also from all over the world. And we also had some networking events already. And this is our 4th official Women in Green Hydrogen co-hosted event. And I'm very happy to announce that there will be much more coming in the next month. So keep updated, stay tuned. There will be very interesting things to come. On the next slide, we can see what we do. So we group our activities into Connect, Empower, and Change. So Connect is really about bringing women together, networking discussions and discourse formats, to have conference side events. We have, for example, a women's breakfast planned in September, and also to exchange through social network groups, as we said, for example, in the LinkedIn network. Our connecting activities are really also overwhelming, and we often get the feedback, it's very interesting to be on events where only women are there. So in our last networking events, we had in each event more than 100 participants from women who work in the sector. The Empower part is really about getting the best out of each other and empowering each other. So we have started a mentorship program also. The launch will be on the 5th of July this year. And we had many applications. And I think we decided to have 50 mentors and 50 mentees who we will guide through this year. Change is, of course, about generating change, because this is what we want to do. We are aiming to have gender balanced panels. We are trying to increase the visibility of the experts, also through social media, but also, just by reminding conference organizers to say, hey, maybe have another look at our expert database and see if you can find another expert that is suitable for your panel, or also your decision gremia. So we are trying to generate change here, and we also have some change stories that we had in the past. Next slide, please. Here you can see the overview of our experts in the expert database. I think this was around 5 months ago. We have done numbers of experts, but it's still nice to see. Next slide. Here you can see how the expert database works. I would just invite everybody who is organizing events or who wants to find an expert also to exchange, to use it. It's a quite intuitive tool. Of course, we have, as I said, 400 experts in there. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide that we have filter criteria. So if you are looking for an expert who speaks your language, who is working in the field that you're looking for example, transport or steel or something, you can look for them in the expert database and then it filters it through. So quite intuitive, and you can see on the right hand side the profile if you click on one of the pictures. Next slide. Our WIG expert database, as we said, is growing, and it's growing fast. We launched it in November last year, and within we already had some profiles in there, and within one day we had, I think, more than doubled the numbers, and we were already at 100 profiles. And then during the last month, we where it was always overwhelming to see where people come from and who join the expert database. So I was accepting the profiles in the back end, and every time I accepted a new expert, I was really overwhelmed to see, wow, there's another professor working on this topic, or there's another CEO or co-founder of a company that is in this expert database. And as you see, we are also really trying to have it international. As we all know, hydrogen is a very international topic. We are talking about import, export, and so on. So we try to have as many countries in the expert database. So we are not only talking about the other countries, but with the other countries. So I'm very happy to have, for example, Chile, Morocco, Kenya, and those countries included in the expert database. Next slide. As I said, we also have network and discourse meetings. Today, it's our first content event on certification, but we also have networking events, and there's a chance to exchange through our LinkedIn group. So you are all invited to join this. On the next slide, we can have again the information about the mentoring program. This year it's already over, but we jump quite directly into the visibility. This is nice. We can see that we feature many of the experts we have in our expert database, but we also get featured by other organizations. For example, for Women's Day, many organizations that are active in media work reached out to us to have some co-hosting of media channel. So this is something we're very happy about, that the visibility, and it's not only about visibility, to remember that we exist and that all the women in the green hydrogen exist. And whenever we post, for example, a featured expert from our expert database, we get the feedback, this is very interesting to see how large the community has grown and how many people are in the expert database now. On the next slide, we can see the partnerships. This is something where Katarina is working very actively on. Many organizations reached out to us to ask, can we collaborate in a way? Can we form maybe a strategic alliance with other women networks, but also can we organize events together, like we have the TÜV SÜD today, but also other conference organizers reached out to us so that we can help them get better balanced panels and better events and more balanced events. On the other side, they also support our organization in return. So we are ready about this. And if you are organizing events, for example, you can also reach out to us or to Katarina directly, and we will happy to have a discussion with you. On the next slide, you can just see where you can contact us. As I said, we have the website, we have our mailing list that you can join, we have Twitter, and you can LinkedIn to just follow us and stay updated. So I'm very happy for every woman who is in the call today and who hadn't known about Women in Green Hydrogen, our network, but every man, of course, is invited to follow our activity, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and give feedback or ask questions. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your interest in our organization. And now I'm very excited to learn more about hydrogen certification and to do a deep dive on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. I think every time I hear about the numbers, how many people we have in our LinkedIn group, in our network, I really feel inspired about the work we have done. And it's great that the excuse, which used to be brought up by so many organizations, by so many men, that they couldn't find a woman to speak at an event, to speak at a conference, this excuse is not valid anymore. And I think this is a great success for all of us. So, but now we can move to the content-related part of the discussion. The title of our event today is Hydrogen Happens Now, And for hydrogen to really happen now, obviously we need some standards. We need to understand what are we talking about. Is the product we are buying, is the product we are promoting the same product talked about in different countries? How can we differentiate green hydrogen from other colors of hydrogen? So these are very key questions for kickstarting the hydrogen economy, and I'm very glad that we have some distinguished experts to talk about this topic with us today. And I would like to start with our first keynote, which will be by Paula Maria Aura-Saupe on certification systems on hydrogen from TÜV SÜD. She will begin with her keynote, and I will just pass over to you, Paula.
Thank you, Katharina.
Excuse me, I see that there is a different order of slides. That's why we will jump over to the other keynote speaker we have today, who is Katharina Seiler from the German Energy Agency. Katharina Seiler is an expert on renewable gases and energy statistics at the German Energy Agency. And Katharina, the floor over to you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. We cannot see you yet.
But my camera is on. Is it on now?
Yes, we see you now. That's great.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for the invitation to the Women's in Green Hydrogen today. My name is Katharina Seiler, and I work as an expert for renewable gases and bioenergy at the German Energy Agency. And today I want to present sustainability requirements for green hydrogen on the EU and the German national level. Next slide, please. So this slide is supposed to give you an overview of how certification is structured within the EU. So on the very top, you see the regulatory framework. In the EU, that would be set by the Renewable Energy Directive 2. And then under that, below that, you have the voluntary schemes, which are officially recognized by the European Commission. For the biofuel sector, you have already 16 voluntary schemes that are officially recognized. And for hydrogen, so far there are none which are officially recognized by the European Commission, but ISCC and Certify, for example, have already raised their willingness to get recognized. And then under the voluntary scheme, you have certification bodies like TÜV SÜD, which conduct the audits on the ground. And then all the information that is linked to the sustainability certificate is then stored within the national registry. In Germany, that would be, for example, NABISI. And then on the EU level, there is a union database foreseen where all the national registries of the member states store the data in a centralized manner, so double counting can be avoided. And if a respective member state has no national registry in place, then the union database offers the opportunity for direct user accounts for hydrogen producers. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as already mentioned, in the EU, we have the Renewable Energy Directive 2, which regulates the renewable transport market within the EU. And this is currently on EU level the only regulatory framework that sets sustainability criteria for hydrogen. And there are 2 articles within this directive which will be further refined within delegated acts. And one delegated act, which you can see on the left-hand side, sets sustainability criteria for electricity being used for hydrogen production. And on the right-hand side, you see the delegated act on Article 28, which sets the GHG calculation methodology for RFMBOs and also defines the eligible carbon sources for e-fuels. And then again to the union database, which is also foreseen by RED II and aims to prevent double counting of certificates. And this union database is planned in 2 phases. So the first phase will be finalized this year and will cover low risk value chains, and the second phase will cover high risk value chains and will be finalized by next year. Next slide, please. So I have already mentioned the delegated act on the renewable electricity criteria, and there has been a leak on the content, and I want to say that the European Commission has not officially published those criteria yet, so it's not set in stone, but probably comes very close to the actual thing. So you would need to, as a hydrogen producer, you would need to prove that you consumed 100% renewable electricity, which can be done by power purchase agreements. And you are also required to use additionally produced electricity. And the reasoning behind that is that to protect the current existing electricity sector, and then only use additionally produced volumes for the hydrogen production, because it's linked to a higher energy efficiency if you use electricity directly. And this can be proven by unsubsidized plants and production volumes, as well as major refurbished installations. And major refurbished installations are defined by a 30% investment compared to new building a new plant. And those plans should be implemented 12 months before, prior to the electrolyzer. Then there's also a geographical correlation which aims to prevent that, for example, electricity produced from the north of Africa is used in the EU to produce hydrogen from it. So, and this criteria is set at the same bidding zone. Bidding zones are defined by the same electricity market price, and they can look very different within the EU. So for example, in Germany, that would equal the national territory, whereas in Italy, you have several bidding zones within one country. And another option is to consume the electricity from neighboring countries when you can prove that there is no grid congestion taking place. Then there is also a temporal correlation. So the temporal difference between the electricity production and hydrogen production should not exceed 15 minutes. And an alternative criteria is that you would need to prove that the renewable energy electricity share in your respective bidding zone is higher compared to the country's average 2 years prior to the hydrogen production. And next slide, please. And now we are leaving the EU and zooming on to Germany. So in Germany, those criteria are implemented by the German Renewable Energy Act, which has the aim to exempt hydrogen producers from the EEG levy. So so for example, here you would also need to prove that you consume 100% renewable electricity, and for the indirect connection you would need to provide cancelled GOs, and if you consume the electricity within the German territory, then those cancelled GOs need to be coupled with the electricity supply. We also have the criteria of additionality, and here the draft of the EEG says that you should not utilize currently subsidized plants, so that would create a business case for plants that fell out of the subsidy scheme. The geographical correlation is defined by that you should use 85% of the consumed electricity from within Germany, and 15% can come from outside of Germany, as long as the respective country is physically connected to Germany. And the temporal correlation is defined by 15 minutes, but only applies to the direct connection. And next slide, please. There is also a category within the German regulatory framework that is not covered by the RED II, which is system serviceability. And here the capacity of the electrolyzer is limited to 6,000 full utilization hours per year. And the reasoning behind it is that hydrogen producers should consume electricity when it's the cheapest. And the reasoning behind that is that when the price is very cheap, then supply must exceed demand. So that would be a signal for electricity overproduction. Next slide, please. Then there is also a funding program called H2 Global, which targets large-scale hydrogen products outside of the EU. There is a special purpose company which will be established called HINCO, and this funding program was developed by GIZ and follows contracts for difference principle, which fixes prices for 10 years. And per project and applicant, there is a maximum of 50 million euros which can be received. There are some funding requirements that the company which receives the fund would need to be established or have a branch in Germany, and the project must be implemented outside of the EU and should not have been possible without the funding, obviously. And next slide, please. Exactly, and also this funding program also addresses or focuses on green hydrogen. So of course it also sets sustainability criteria. And for example, in regard to renewable electricity, it will be strongly oriented on the RED II Delegated Act, which I already presented. There will be also sustainable carbon sources, which will be probably also be inspired by the second Delegated Act I mentioned today. Then there will be also some additional criteria on sustainable water consumption and ILUC risks, and also there will be a criteria which ensures that workers' rights are respected, probably according to the ILO standards. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so this other DENA activities regarding hydrogen certification are that we, for example, advise the Australian Smart Energy Council on setting up a net zero certification scheme. And we are also a consortium partner within the EU Regatrace project, where we published a report on the guidelines for the verification of hydrogen, which can be downloaded via this QR code, which you can see on the right-hand side. And then we also have platforms and alliances where hydrogen producers or market players can get in contact with us. That would be the Global Alliance Power Fuels and Strategie platform Power to Gas. And in the Global Alliance Power Fuels, there are also they have their own website. There are frequently reports uploaded. For example, last year there was a report on the carbon sources, and right now we are working on a fact sheet on water consumption. So that was the presentation from my side, and thank you very much for your attention.
Katharina, thanks a lot. That was a great overview on where we stand in regards to sustainability criteria for hydrogen, and how do we differentiate hydrogen, green hydrogen, from all the other colors? How do we make sense of the greenhouse gas emissions when producing hydrogen? And I'm sure there will be lots of questions also from the audience on sustainability, but I will give these questions for the panel. And for now, I will now switch to Paula Maria Aura-Saupe. She is the business line manager for climate action certification at TÜV SÜD and our second keynote speaker. Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katharina. I'm very happy to have the possibility to speak here on the certification systems on hydrogen. So next slide, please. In the next 15 minutes, I would like to guide you through this agenda. We will talk about the 5 points, starting with why certification is important. We will have a look at the color theory of hydrogen, following functioning of product certification systems. Then we will check on the existing certification systems in Germany, and I will close my presentation with an outlook on the development for certification systems. Next slide, please. So, certification of hydrogen, is that really necessary? In a purely renewable world, we would say no. But in short term, we will have a significant part of our energy mix coming from fossil fuels. So at least until 2050, yes, it will be necessary. Why? Because produced hydrogen should contribute significantly to climate protection. It must emit remarkably less greenhouse gases than conventionally produced hydrogen, and it needs to consider the whole value chain. Furthermore, certification gives clear criteria for industries and investors as to which technologies are suitable and sustainable for the future. And of course, certification prevents double counting or multiple sales of CO2 reduced hydrogen. Next slide, please. So here we have a look at the color theory. We can see that the hydrogen strategies differ from the German one and the EU one. In Germany, there have been 4 colors defined. We have gray hydrogen, which is based on fossil resources. The common technology used here is reforming of natural gas. Then we have blue hydrogen, which is also based on fossil fuels in combination with carbon capture and storage. We can talk about CO2 neutrality because CO2 is not emitted into the atmosphere, and on a balance sheet, it's CO2 neutral. Then we have turquoise hydrogen, which is produced by thermal cracking of methane. A prerequisite for CO2 neutrality here is that the heat supply of the high temperature reactor is coming from renewable energies. Green hydrogen in Germany is defined as hydrogen coming from electrolyzers, which was powered by renewable energies. So next slide, please. In the EU, we have the 3 categories. We have fossil-based hydrogen, which is similar to Germany. Then we have low-carbon fossil-based hydrogen with carbon capture and storage. The main difference here is that under low-carbon hydrogen, also hydrogen that is produced using nuclear energy can be considered, which is not included in the German strategy. Renewable hydrogen is, of course, hydrogen coming from electrolyzers, but as well as reforming of biogas or biochemical conversion of biomass, considering that it has been sustainably produced. So next slide, please. There are different approaches for a product certification system. I would like to introduce 3 of them. The beginning the book and claim approach, which is used for a guarantee of origin system in regard to electricity from renewable energies. The main idea is that the physical electricity is separated from the renewable attribute. So the physical electricity takes its way through the electricity net right until the end consumer. At the same time, the renewable attribute is put into a guarantee of origin, which can then be traded in the guarantee of origin register. And when an end consumer says, here, I would like to consume 100% electricity coming from renewable sources, the guarantee of origins are cancelled and taken out of the system. And that's the point where the renewable energy attribute and the physical electricity is put together again. Next slide, please. Then we have the mass balance approach, where physical and renewable attribute stays together. The whole value chain is considered from cultivating and gathering the gas just until the end supplier. And at each processing or trading step, a verification is done. Why is that so? Because at each processing step, energy is needed to do the actual work, and that needs to be considered in the GHG calculation. Next slide, please. So the third approach is the direct production and supply on-site. You can see on the left side here, there is a renewable energy plant. Let's say it's a wind farm. The plant is connected via the grid to an electryseur. In the electrolyzer, hydrogen is produced. It's then stored on-site and directly delivered to the end consumer. Next slide, please. So when we have a look at the already existing certification schemes in Germany, on the example for water electrolyzers, we see there are 3 existing systems: the DENA Bioregister, we have the Certify Registry, and TÜV SÜD Green Hydrogen. They differ in certain parts. We see here they differ in the requirements regarding renewable energy. They differ in regard to the GHG reduction requirement and as well to the approach chosen for the registry. In my presentation today, I will focus on Certify and TÜV SÜD, as these are the standards TÜV SÜD is actively involved. We can see Certify requires 100% renewable resources, a minimum GHG reduction of 60%, and the book and claim approach is used. TÜV SÜD Green Hydrogen also requires 100% renewable energies, plus additionality criteria for electricity supply. There exists 3 options the client can choose. First option is that out of the 100% coming from renewable sources, 30% need to come from power plants that are not older than 3 years. So the idea behind that is that the client actively contributes to the enlargement of renewable power plants. Second option is the integration of fluctual renewable energies like PV or wind, as they are more difficult to integrate into the system than large hydropower plants that can also deliver baseload electricity. And the third option is the investment into a fund. So 0.2 euro cent per kilowatt hour hydrogen produced is put into a fund, and the fund, when it reaches a certain amount of money, is used to reinvest in renewable energies. TÜV SÜD requires a reduction of 75% of GHG emissions, and these emissions include compression, liquefaction, and transportation. As an approach, it can be chosen between book and claim or the mass balance approach. Next slide, please. So how does a certification process look like? At the beginning, an account needs to be opened at Certify, which is run by Grexel. Then to register a plant there, an initial plant audit needs to be conducted by an independent third party like TÜV SÜD. When all requirements are fulfilled, the plant is finally registered and can generate guarantees of origins. These guarantees of origins again have to be verified by an independent third party. If all requirements are met, they can finally be issued and traded within the registry. And when an end consumer says, here, I would like to consume 100 megawatt hours green hydrogen, the GOs are cancelled and taken out of the system. Next slide, please. So further developments for a certification system. There, what my co-speaker Katharina said, the delegated acts will be very important. They will have significant influence on the certification schemes. She already talked about the temporal correlation, simultaneous supply will play a role, local or geographical correlation, and the further additionality criteria like new installation, promotion fund, dedicated production. The delegated acts are still under construction, but we have Corinna here from Geilhaus, and she will give us some insights what is happening at the moment there. The Renewable Energy Directive 2, Article 19, also mentions the EU-wide GEO system for gases. This includes biomethane, synthetic methane, and hydrogen. We see further demand in the definition of blue, turquoise, and other colored hydrogen, and further need for certification criteria in that area. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hand over to you, Katharina.
Thanks a lot, Paula. Thank you for this very informative keynote. I learned a lot, and I see that there is so much we still have to do in order to avoid a regulatory patchwork when talking about certification of hydrogen. And with this, I would like to move to our panel discussion. I think now we can even close the slides so that we are just seen for our audience. And for our panel discussion, besides the keynote speakers we've just heard, I would like to welcome other panelists. So first of all, it's Karina Kraster. She is Commercial Director at the European Green Hydrogen Acceleration Center of Eno Energy. Karina, I welcome you. Then we have Corinna Jörling with us, who is the Senior Consultant in the Energy area at Guidehouse. Welcome, Corinna. And then we have Katharina Kocher, also from TÜV SÜD. She's Senior Hydrogen Expert. So I welcome you all, and I remind the audience that you can ask our speakers questions via the Q&A function. I have already seen some very interesting questions, which I will come to later. So Katharina Kocher, I will sometimes use the surnames. As you can see, we have two Katharinas here today. Katharina Kocher, we've heard so much about the different approaches to certification, different colors, sustainability requirements. But where are we in implementing and using hydrogen? Is it cost competitive, and can we expect the hydrogen economy to really scale up in the next decade?
So I would say that we all know that currently the costs of hydrogen production and transportation are a burden for industry, but also for the end user. However, in my opinion, this technology remains competitive at all. So we know from various studies that green hydrogen can be produced at competitive prices from 2030 onwards compared to fossil fuels. In this regard, I think we have to mention 3 important issues what might be playing key roles here. So first is the price of electricity coming from renewable energies like wind and solar, as well as the electrolysis processes are leading issues in this context. For the quantities of hydrogen and services required in the future, it is important to increase the system reliability and develop appropriate production technologies, meaning to improve the system automation and to scale up plants. So scaling up existing hydrogen technologies will deliver competitive low-carbon solutions across a wide range of applications by 2030 and may offer competitive low-carbon alternatives to conventional fossil fuels. Yet to reach this scale, there is a need for investment, demand creation, and policy alignment. And all these 3 are players which have to play together and not against each other. So a strategic and concerted approach by the responsible ministries in the government and the creation of political frameworks are decisive. And in order to enable regulations from government will accelerate industry investment that will ultimately lead to scale up. So, and in the end, probably we always have to ask ourselves the question, what will be the price if we don't invest in new technologies?
This is definitely a key question. Thanks a lot, Katharina. You mentioned this demand creation. Karina, from your current work at the ECAG and also from your past position when you were with Air Liquide, can you maybe tell us how certification is perceived on the demand side? Is it being perceived as an enabler, or do some companies see it as a hurdle? Because we've heard about some very strict sustainability requirements. So what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think demand side in general is really key when we look at the hydrogen space. So I always, take a little bit of a step back when we look at the demand side, because the question here is like, what do we want to achieve always? Yeah, so we want to stay in the 1.5 degree boundaries. We want to decarbonize sectors such as industry, transport, etc. And if we want to do that, first question is, can that be electrified? That is always for me the key question. Can we start with that? If it can't, we need a molecule to do that. That molecule is like as widely now accepted hydrogen as an energy vector. And now we come to the point is, okay, so hydrogen becomes a mean then, another goal. So a mean to decarbonize end products. And that is where also demand side stimulation on my side should be heading to. Because when we look at end products that can be produced with hydrogen upstream. So for example, a car that uses green steel that is produced with green hydrogen upstream. There, let's say the certification of hydrogen upstream becomes really important, because that is one of the key, let's say, inputs that you need when you go down the value chain. It is very upstream, but it's key. And this is why I think, let's say, we need hydrogen certification on the one hand, because it can help on the one hand to compare solutions. So for example, if you were to produce a car with green steel and you use, for example, an electric arc furnace only, or you use hydrogen, that will come in and help compare solutions. And that should be done through life cycle assessment and really to have thorough, let's say, carbon allocation methodology, so that we really understand what are we buying here, which kind of product are we buying. Then it also will create trust on the investor side, because on the investor, but also on the consumer side. So I need to understand what I'm buying and what I'm putting my money in. And also it will help to allow for tracking and avoid double counting. So I think those are key aspects. And I want to just highlight again that I think when we look at the production of end products, we want to decarbonize in the end. hydrogen certification is a key focus, but then there will be also other certifications that we would need to come along with it. So for example, CO2 certification, where does the CO2 come from, etc., in order really to keep this end goal in mind, which is to decarbonize end products for end consumers.
Thank you. Thank you. This already gives so much food for thought. I thought that it was especially important what you said, that certification gives trust, provides trust for the investors. Corina, I would like to pose my next question to you, because from the keynotes I've heard, I had a feeling, oh my God, there are so many approaches and we are ending up in a regulatory patchwork. So can we expect something which will change this from the July package? What is the European Commission is currently working on?
Thank you, Yekaterina. And I agree, there is a risk for a regulatory patchwork when it comes to hydrogen sustainability criteria at the moment, with the European and then the national initiatives, in particular in Germany at the moment. And I think the whole climate action community is basically currently on a countdown to the 14th of July, when the European Commission will publish the first batch of initiatives of how to implement the Fit for 55 package. And so with regard to green hydrogen, I think what will be most relevant is the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, so the RED III, if you will. And obviously, we have to now take a glance into the crystal ball together, but I'm willing to do that. I think there are several aspects that we should look out for in particular with the RED III revision. And then the first one would be a possible ambition, or an expected ambition increase actually, for the transport target, which is currently at 14% renewable energy share. This will definitely be increased, but by how much? The second aspect to look out for, in my opinion, would be the industry sector. There is some rumors that there's an appetite to be more concrete on what role hydrogen and green hydrogen will play for industry, because we also have to keep in mind the sustainability criteria currently that will come out of the delegated acts. They will apply to the transport sector only. But you never know, there may be changes to this, and this may in the end also apply to other sectors such as industry. So this is something to really look out for, because it would have huge consequences. And then the third aspect to look out for, what I would recommend, is to take a close look at for hydrogen. At the moment, for green hydrogen, this is very different from biofuels. Will this remain the same? And what does this mean for imports of hydrogen from outside of the European Union? Now, one more aspect, will we also see the delegated acts on the 14th of July? I think this is what everyone's waiting for. And to be honest, we don't have a guarantee for this. It's possible that the Commission will not do this together with the RED III revision proposals, but that the industry and the community for climate action will have to wait a little bit longer. We don't know. We as Guidehouse have given our recommendations for the delegated acts to the Commission, as we were commissioned by DG ENA, and we're now excited and of course in final discussions of how this is going to look like, but we don't have a guarantee on the timeline yet. And there is of course a sense of urgency and a need for investment certainty that really depends on how this criteria is going to look like. So I think that's a very exciting phase at the moment.
Yeah, I totally share your excitement, and we are also waiting for the delegated acts. So I guess this is a much awaited piece of legislation. But Corina, if I may, I would like to follow up on what you just said, because you also mentioned imports. And we had one question in our Q&As from the audience. Will the sustainability criteria which were presented by Katarina, so the sustainability criteria from the delegated act, will they be applied to imports as well? And what is maybe your take on importing green hydrogen and making sure we are importing a sustainable product?
I had a lag. This was still directed to me, right? Okay. In that case, so what about countries outside the European Union? So in principle, all criteria that apply within the European Union territory will also apply for imports from outside the European territory. This is similar to the case of biofuels, where regardless of where they're produced, the criteria that are in place from the European regulation count in all territories. Having said that, this is not without complication, because as Katharina from DENA presented earlier, there will probably be a reference to bidding zones, and not all countries have a liberalized electricity market. So, for example, countries from the Gulf region, they don't have liberalized electricity markets yet, and a specific reference to a bidding zone may present some challenges. So we will have to have a look out for whether the Commission will be mocked on what the criteria mean for countries that do not have this, for example. And there are other details the criteria will apply.
Thank you, Corinna. I also had a slight lag in the connection, but I hope that the audience could hear your great answer to this question. I have one question from the audience to Katharina Seiler from DENA, and it refers to H2 Global. So the person is asking whether the funding program of H2 Global is only applicable to hydrogen producers, or is it also applicable to players across the whole hydrogen's value chain?
It's applicable to the hydrogen producers. So
And are there any more details on this instrument of contracts for difference, which you could share with us?
I mean, there will be a set market price. And then, the difference will be covered by the funding program, and that would be the information I have.
Okay, but no more details yet. I guess this H2 Global and how can we finance this import products is also like a very exciting topic which interests many players outside there at the moment. And related to this, Paula, Corinna has already spoken about imports of hydrogen and how will we make sure that the imported hydrogen is also sustainable. But then I have a question to you on additionality. We've heard a lot on additionality in the keynote presentations. And so in Europe, we are already quite progressed in switching our energy supply from fossil fuels to renewable energies. Like at least in Germany, for example, we have 50% of renewable energy in the power mix. But for example, if we go to Saudi Arabia, as far as I know, the share of renewable energy is 1%. Or Morocco, which is very often suggested as a potential exporter of hydrogen, then the share of renewable energy there is 7%. So how can we ensure additionality in these countries where the power sector is still fossil-based?
Just have to unmute myself. The idea of the additionality criteria in our aspect is that the enlargement of the renewable energy is promoted, like when you use the promotional fund, you are putting aside a specific amount of money to at a later time invest that in the promotion of renewable energies. And I think that is worldwide possible to do, even when you only have 1% of renewable energy in your mix. You have more potential to enlarge your system. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I still guess additionality will be a main challenge for us, as you said. As long as we don't have a fully renewable-based system, then I guess it will be one of the main challenges for the domestic production in Europe, but also for importing hydrogen. Yeah.
Maybe I can add here, because you mentioned Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. There's some really interesting projects going on there. There's Masdar City and NEOM, where Saudi Arabia is really planning to build up cities from the scratch that are totally organized, sustainable, with photovoltaic and wind as the only electricity resource. So there are big plans going on there, and they have the the money to invest in these technologies. So that's a big potential that they have.
Great. This is a very interesting insight, and I see that Corina would like to react to what Paula just said. Corina, please.
Thank you. Just a real quick complimentary comment, perhaps, if I may add. In the region also, Oman is announcing really large, very exciting projects at the moment, some of which have already decided for basically on how they're going to ensure the sustainability. So the high port in Duqm project is going to have dedicated renewable energy expansion on a really large scale. Other projects, I think, are not quite as advanced in their decision on how they're going to apply sustainability criteria. So I think that's an important role for maybe European stakeholders, German stakeholders to play, to also consult on what this is going to look like, because the investors need certainty. They can't have it at the moment. So we're a bit in a difficult phase, but some aspects can be taken into account already now in the projects in these countries.
Great, thanks a lot. But obviously, when we want to import hydrogen from other countries, we need to get it somehow to Europe, to other places across the world. So the transport will play a major role. Katharina, you work a lot on this topic of transporting hydrogen. So what do we need to consider when talking about the supply chains of hydrogen and Power-to-X products? And can we also integrate the issue of transport, sustainable transport, in certification systems for hydrogen? It was a question to Katharina Kocher. I'm sorry, because it's two Katharinas here.
Okay, so in the end, to achieve decarbonization, hydrogen must find its way to the end users in the industry, mobility, and in the heat supply. So this is possible via different ways. So the main established technologies which are currently on the forecast will be the transport via pipelines, but also the transport and storage technologies in tanks and via trailers. So hydrogen can directly be transported as a gas or a liquefied as a gas or a liquid, and these technologies will still prevail as they are well established in the meanwhile. And due to the technology advancement, I think also other technologies are alternatives and have the option to provide transport and storage technologies, like the transport of hydrogen in the form in which it is chemically or physically bound, like in methanol or ammonia, but also later on with the technology advancement via liquid organic hydrogen carriers or metal hydrides. And many regions in the world prepare the trade of sustainable produced energy sources and basic chemicals, which enables them also to develop new energy partnerships. And this opens new pathways way by way. And we have to use what is still here and use this technology advancement for the future, yes.
Thanks a lot. Maybe just a quick follow-up question. What is the most promising energy carrier in your view? So you mentioned the liquid organic hydrogen carrier, methanol. We also talk a lot about ammonia, transport and environment. So what is the most promising one in your view?
I think we can say that there is one promising technology. So because if we want to use it efficiently, hydrogen, we have to combine different technologies. And for each end user, I would say there is a special technologies which fits better than another, for example. And you always have to look at the costs and what would be the best for my technology application in the end.
Thanks a lot. I saw that Paula wanted to react directly to this, please.
Just unmuted. Yes, I just wanted to add that transportation in regard to certification is a very important point for us, as the emissions from transportation need to be considered for green hydrogen as well. We had this example that a big amount of hydrogen can be produced in Africa and be then shipped to Europe or to another place where energy is needed. And if the emissions from transport are not considered for green hydrogen, we would give wrong signals to the market. That is something I would like to add here.
Thank you. That's thanks a lot, Paula. Indeed. So we have different pieces of the value chain, and we need to make sure that the entire value chain is sustainable. But then this makes the process ever more complex. Maybe it also makes the process ever more expensive. Karina, the question to you: do you think the hydrogen certification, especially green hydrogen certification, would it affect end consumer prices? And do you maybe have any forecasts on this price increase models? This is a question from the audience we just received.
Yeah, so I think on my side, I think the, let's say, certification process as such will not increase the price significantly in the end. Because I mean, you have, when you look at the certified system that I know a bit, like let's say the audit part, etc., it's not that expensive that it will really significantly add to the price of hydrogen in the end. However, I think we always have the premium at the end product that comes through the, let's say, increase of cost of hydrogen, which is a different story then. And there we need to tackle, let's say, markets that where the premium today can already be better absorbed. And this is something that we're looking at European Green Hydrogen Acceleration Center. You see, for example, in steel, there is a premium, a significant premium, but it can be absorbed at the end product. That means like a car costs approximately 100 to 300 euro more in the end price if you were to buy a new car. And, you know, this is something I think that is even more relevant than looking at the cost of certification. It's really at the cost at the end product. How much is that being increased? And how can we prove that through certification?
Well, this is very interesting insight in this lead markets. How do you think can we support this implementation of the premium products in the lead markets? So, for example, one idea I've heard of was that we could include green steel in the CO2 standards for cars. So currently the CO2 standards do not account for the production of cars. Do you think this is an approach we could at least try, or do you see some other regulatory frameworks which we could use?
I think this would be great to have this as a regulatory framework, but we see already, let's say, that the market, the demand side is already doing quite a lot of work there. So you have a lot of automotive companies that have committed now to carbon neutral objectives for scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, you know, where you know, this will be driven by the financial market, by the end shareholder in the end in those companies. But I think if this could be held with standards where you have a standard on, for example, green steel that is being produced with green hydrogen, and you have a definition and a certification process of the green hydrogen upstream, that would really help a lot to stimulate the market and decarbonize the end products.
This is great. Maybe one last follow-up question on this. Any other lead markets you would consider besides cars? So maybe in construction, or maybe some other fields you see as the potential lead markets for green hydrogen?
Yeah, so I think, let's say the automotive industry so you have the different sectors. So you have, for example, steel, you have aviation fuels, heavy goods vehicles, you have fertilizers, etc., and all the target markets in industry, at least for green hydrogen. The IC steel is the most advanced one, and here the automotive sector is, let's say, the key consumer. You also have construction in steel, which is quite keen. But here, let's say the uptake is a bit slower because it's a more traditional market that is a bit more afraid of innovations, I would say. But you also see, I think, an interesting development in the fertilizer industry, because here, let's say from a technological perspective and also from a certification perspective, using green hydrogen in the downstream product is relatively easy, and the premium there is also relatively low. And therefore, we see there is also a key market to look at. And then you have other sectors where this premium is a bit harder to pass on. Yeah, like I'd say the fuel sector, especially, I think it's more difficult because it's significant premiums. But that would be my ranking.
Thanks a lot. I think this is already very helpful in understanding the lead markets. You just mentioned fuels, you also mentioned aviation. So, of course, when we talk, for example, about the production of e-kerosene, then we also need to talk about the CO2 source. Corinna, you mentioned the CO2 source also in your presentation, and we heard from Katharina Seiler that there will be a delegated act on CO2 sources from the European Commission. Can you elaborate a bit more? What can we expect on CO2 sources from the regulatory side? And maybe what are the criteria? Because we now heard so many criteria for hydrogen. What would be the criteria for CO2 sources?
So as for the electricity input, this is to me again, right? The Katharina and Corinna's are a bit confusing. Thank you, Katharina. So as for the electricity input, the act is not yet published, so the European Commission is still working on it at the moment. So again, crystal ball a little bit, but there are some things that we can say about it. One is that Article 28 prescribes that there must be a 70% greenhouse gas emission reduction compared to the fossil comparators. So this is something that provides a strong guideline already. What this means very specifically for the diff carbon routes is to be defined. It's basically clear that direct air capture will be allowed as a carbon source. For biofuels, it's a little more tricky. And then for the industry, so taking emissions from industry sources, this may be allowed, but the provision would be that the saved emissions would have to be cancelled under the European ETS scheme then, so that we don't have a double counting of the emission savings. And this, as we have already raised, the issue of what happens outside the European territory may present a challenge once again, because obviously the EU ETS covers only the European territory. So what would this mean for hydrogen derivative production, such as e-kerosene outside the European Union, if they want to use industry emissions from a steel plant, for example, for producing the hydrogen derivative and cannot cancel because they don't have the EU ETS, obviously. So this is a big question still to be answered. I think a very important one, because it's a lot more commercially attractive at the moment to use carbon sources that are very concentrated, such as from industry, than
I think
capture, which is at the moment possible, but a lot more expensive, definitely.
There was this little problem with the connection, but we heard you very well. And just to sum up that, yeah, with industry sources, we are not avoiding carbon really, but we are only halving it. So yeah, as you said, direct air capture will be the only sustainable option in the long term. Paula, I actually have two questions from the audience, which I would like to direct to you. One question is, so what will be the future of the certify model or the certify system if we have the delegated act of the EU and on hydrogen, then later on CO2 sources? So do you think there is a future for the certify model and also for the certification system you have at TÜV SÜD? Maybe you have an idea on how these systems can be consolidated at some point. And the second question we received from the audience is on the difference between the German approach and the EU approach. And I guess here the key is, do you consider or do you think it will be important to include low carbon gases such as blue hydrogen in the EU-wide certification scheme?
All right.
Over to you. Many difficult questions, but we have time.
Yeah, so let's start with Certify. So Certify was a project that started, I think, 10 years ago, phase 1, with really defining what is green hydrogen, how can we certify it. And now, 10 years later, we are in phase 3, where it really goes into implementation. So Certify is an initiative from different companies. We have Grexel, which is now responsible for the registry. They are running the registry. Then we have the Ludwig Böll Öko, Systemtechnik, Initio, TNO, and TÜV SÜD. And TÜV SÜD is in the project as the independent third party. So now in phase 3, we see that the first projects are really getting certified and registered in the registry, which is nice to see. One question from your side was, how can certify and TÜV SÜD be combined? So the idea is that certify is used as a baseline certification, so it gives the requirements for the guarantee of origins. So the minimum requirements of certify have to be fulfilled, and the TÜV SÜD standard can be put on top as additional criteria. As we see, we have other requirements in regard to the GHG reductions. They're a little bit sharper, and we have also requirements in regard to additionality. So the idea is to really combine them, to have certify as a basis, and then the client can choose if they want to put TÜV SÜD as an add-on to the certification. This is also how we do it in the world of electricity at the moment. So then the second question was regarding why there are different definitions on the color theory in Germany and in the EU. I think that is because Germany has a look at its own system. And Germany at a certain time after Fukushima decided, okay, we will leave nuclear energy for good. And in the EU, we have different stakeholders. We have, for example, we have France, where still 75% of the electricity source is coming from nuclear energy. So, of course, they are keen that their system is also working in this hydrogen atmosphere. And our French colleagues promoted the definition of low carbon hydrogen, as one source can of course be nuclear energy. So that is why on a natural basis the definition can be different than the EU basis, as the EU needs to consider more stakeholders.
And just to follow up here, so Germany is not using nuclear power domestically anymore. So how do you think Germany will go about importing nuclear-based hydrogen from France?
A very political question. I mean, when energy is needed, the grids are connected. So Germany and France, they are part of the same grids, and physical, it doesn't matter where the origin comes from. The physical energy will flow, and if it comes from France, it comes from France. So we cannot choose
which molecules we take.
Which molecules come to the exactly. Yeah.
Well, great. I have another question which I would like to split in several questions. It came from the audience on imports. So maybe the first one is, I would like to ask it to all of you in the panel. Do you think the imported hydrogen will be significantly cheaper than the hydrogen produced in Europe? Any reactions?
So maybe I can take that one. So as a first input, so we're working on with project holders in Chile. We've also contacted to companies in Saudi Arabia, and I think surely like there are certain spots, and I think it's really a location question that where renewable energy is a lot cheaper, and therefore the hydrogen is a lot cheaper, because you have 3/4 of the input of or like 2/3 of the input of the price in hydrogen is linked to the electricity you're consuming. And therefore I think, yeah, there are a lot of good spots around the world where you find those favorable renewable electricity conditions. Nevertheless, I think there are certain spots in Europe as well, and we think about, like, say, the north of Sweden, where we have also a project where really, like, there is an abundance of renewable electricity, notably hydro, that can be regulated, etc. As well in this North Sea and in the south of Europe, in Spain, Portugal, Italy, where we have also similar situations. And I think there it really is also a political decision here. What do we want to foster first, and how do we want to organize this? And you see that certain countries in Europe that have less access, let's say, to abundance of renewable electricity and have strong industrial activities, such as the Netherlands, for example, they're signing MOUs around the world, you know, to try to understand, okay, how can we assure also access to renewable power in order to keep industry also in Europe. So I think it will be a mix.
Well, they're very interesting, because then, Karina, if I may, I will stay with you for this block of questions, because the question we received from the audience, the person is assuming that the imported hydrogen will be cheaper, and you also said that it might be. There might be locations where the imported hydrogen will be cheaper, but then we are also developing some plants in Germany. So do you see any threat to the German hydrogen economy, or even like the European hydrogen industry, threat from the imports from the outside, or do you rather see it as complementary elements in the global hydrogen market?
I think it's again a location question as well, because I mean, if you think about, you know, if you could produce in Germany, for example, with, for example, wind from the North Sea, there you don't have eventually all those, let's say, transportation issues that you also have to tackle, you know, because it's a molecule, so it's not really like an electron. It's a molecule that we need to transport, so you need to develop either a hydrogen pipeline, which will take time. Transferring, for example, the gas network will take time. And by then prices will go down. So I think it's really a location question. Do you also have access to a port, for example, where you can actually, you know, really import relatively easily, such as in Rotterdam, for example. But countries that are more inland, I think there will be, it's likely that there will be, let's say, economically viable solutions inland as well. So yeah, I think it's still open. We don't have a lot of renewable hydrogen plants yet in the world. Yeah, so let's see how the market develops.
That's true. I think the current installed capacity in Germany is something around 30 megawatt of electrolyzer capacity. Maybe I'm wrong. But this actually sits very well to my next question to Katharina Seiler from DENA, because at DENA, you are looking a lot at the projects in Germany, and Germany has the target of 5 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity in 2030. So do you think the German hydrogen industry will be competitive, and will we reach the 5 gigawatt target in 2030, or maybe there is even a potential of increasing the overall target? What is your take on it based on your experience working with DENA?
I think it's difficult to say at this moment, also because of the set criteria to actually also derive from them what are the volumes actually. So when we take all those criteria into consideration of the 15 minutes and the geographical correlation, what volumes can we actually derive from this? And is this harmonized to the targets we set within the national hydrogen strategy? So I think this is a difficult question and needs the right calculations. Yeah.
Thank you. Corina, I saw that you wanted to react to the discussion we were just having, so over to you.
Yes, just a quick comment in addition to what Corina has already said on the question of whether imported will be significantly cheaper. And I do have some strong doubts, actually, just because the transport costs will probably be high, but are also at the moment tied to high uncertainty, because we do not have those ships yet, which Paula mentioned, that will transport the hydrogen or the green ammonia in a way that doesn't emit additional emissions, and will then make the hydrogen incompatible with the targets that the RED sets, and then will not achieve the premium price in the European context. So this is really something to look out for. As long as we have sources, as Corina mentioned, like from Sweden, but also the Iberian Peninsula with Portugal and Spain, where we can import a lot cheaper to countries with industrial centers like the Netherlands, but in particular Germany. It's not self-evident that imports will control the market. I mean, there will be some competition. There will probably be imports given the huge volumes that are needed for full decarbonization. We probably won't be able to cover this within the European Union, but this discussion has to be continued. Like, this is not yet decided and cannot be clearly modeled at the moment either, due to the high uncertainties, of course.
Well, I think this was a key statement from your side, that it's not certain that imports will be dominating the market. And I think this is also a great message for the European hydrogen industry. But if we stay with the topic of imports for a moment, then when certifying hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives, there will be even more challenges. And one question we received from the audience is, how does the provision of fresh water for the production of hydrogen in places like Africa or Australia impact sustainability and price? I think this is a great question, and I would like to give it to Katharina Kocher from TÜV SÜD, if I may.
Yes, I can try to answer it. Usually the provision of water shouldn't be the problem. So if you want to do electrolysis, you always have to treat your water in a certain way that there are no salts and anything. So you have to use very pure water. So it doesn't matter where the water comes from. So if it is not pure, if it is pure or not, you have to say. But of course, the more complex a plant for the electrolysis becomes, the higher the price is.
And so you said that the water doesn't need to be pure, but we cannot use salt water, I assume. We would need to apply desalination plants, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and they would probably also need to be powered with renewable energy.
Of course, this would be the task.
Okay, well, there are so many challenges, and Katharina Seiler, you would like to react to this, please.
Yeah, on the water consumption, because also in the Regulatory's report I mentioned today, we also made some recommendations on water, and I think it should. So of course, hydrogen projects should be implemented in a way that water resources are first and foremost reserved for local communities. That's just what I wanted to add to that.
Thanks a lot. I would like to ask a general question, maybe a more strategic question on the deployment of renewable energy, because we talked a lot about sustainability of hydrogen. Then we heard from Corinna about the CO2 sources, and then obviously the direct air capture plants, they would also need to be powered with renewable energy. And just now we added another element about desalination plants, for example, in places where we don't have the water access the way we would have it in Europe. So this seems like a huge need of deployment of renewable energy. Can we make it? And if yes, what is the time scale? Do you think this is something to be achieved by 2030, 40, or are we talking long term? And Paula, I see you smiling. That's why I will pass this question to you. And then I also see Corinna. So Paula and Corinna, I'm passing this question to both of you.
I think it's a very difficult question and a very political one. I mean, we need to manage. We need to manage that until 2050. We produce really net zero emissions, and I mean, for some areas in the industry that will not be really possible. I mean, if we look at the steel industry or the cement industry, even with new technologies coming up in 2015, it will be very, very difficult that they have net zero emissions. So there will be the need for Senken projects, like projects that capture CO2 for large forest projects would be a possibility, or capturing carbon in the soil. It's not a one-way path. It's like a flower band of possibilities where we have to choose from, and where we have to build our industry on. So we cannot go only one way. We really have to look at the whole band of possibilities that are there.
Thank you, Corinna. Would you like to add something to this?
Yes, I would like to share a bit of a personal opinion on the issues of different sustainability criteria. And I personally think that we need to prioritize a little bit. There are a lot of criteria that you could apply to hydrogen production, but I really think that we need to make sure that the electricity input and the carbon input, this we get right. These are the most important levers, in my opinion. And then there are criteria like water or even land use is often discussed as well. And I'm not saying those are not important, but I think the other ones are the larger levers here, and we need to make sure that there won't be a trade-off where we have excellent criteria for the water, but then reduce the criteria for electricity input. So personally, I think if we make sure that we don't do, or the producers outside the European Union, inside the European Union, don't do significant damage, for example, to water sources, then this perhaps is already fine, and we don't have to overload the hydrogen production too much to make it the holiest of products we have ever seen. This is difficult, of course. It's a trade-off, but we need to really look at the most important criteria, in my opinion, and put them first.
The approach you're just describing relates very well to one question we received from the audience. The person is saying, since there are so many regulations, some of them unclear, some of them changing, do you think that German government, but I would also talk about European governments as such, should pursue an approach similar to Reallabore? So Reallabore, for non-German speakers in the event, these are like regulatory sandboxes, an approach in the German regulation which allows for some exemptions for projects which pursue an innovative approach. So do you think such regulatory sandboxes for large-scale projects for importing hydrogen should be applied in order, as you said, not to wait for this holiest hydrogen product to finally appear on the global market, but then just to kickstart the value chains, the supply chains, already in the short to medium term?
No. Can I react on this?
Carina, sure.
Just a short reaction, because there's already when I saw the question, there was also the question of kickstarting it for gigawatt scale projects. So I can jump in there, because we have already a project, for example, now H2 Green Steel in Sweden. It's a new greenfield steel plant that is being set up right now. It's already in the money. It will be set up and running by 2024, full scale by 2030, and it's 800 megawatt electrolyzer. So we're already, at almost gigascale size in Sweden, and this will run. Yeah. So I think if the goal is to really kickstart this and decrease the cost, I think that we don't need that. We can do that in Europe. We don't need to have imports for that. But I let the others react for that as well.
But I would like to follow up on this, Carina, because it's very interesting what you are saying, that you already have a project which is in the money. Because I think that there is some perception across the policymakers that hydrogen is not in the money yet. Can you maybe tell us what were the why is this project in the money? So what are the main reasons for the success, and maybe the implications for the next projects in gigawatt scale, so which could reach cost competitiveness soon?
It's similar to what I've said before, which is linked to the premium in the end product. So when you look at the project is here, a greenfield plant. So it's only going to produce green steel, 5 million tons. And there is, on the one hand, like you look at the premium in the end product, it's actually absorbable by the automotive industry, so you can pass that on. So, and there's also, let's say, business model innovation, because what we did there, we are an early investor in this project, is we brought together actors along the value chain that share risks, but also potential upsides of the project. And what we see today in hydrogen, you know, you have this traditional way of thinking of mature markets where you have one actor, you know, looking upstream and downstream, but only one upstream, one downstream of the value chain, and they're going to sell something to somebody with bilateral contracts. And each act of the chain says, okay, my risk is so high, I need to price in a margin, and that margin is being passed on till the end, to the end product. And therefore you have a product that is too high. If you combine all of those actors and they create a new company where they co-invest, then you can share risk, but also then the potential upsides, and you can get a kickstart of that kind of project. And I think if we were to build more projects like this, really going down to the end customer, having, for example, Scania in our project, it's Scania that is investing in that project, as well as Daimler. You can really create projects that are economically viable today. And as I said before, it depends on the sector, but in steel, that's already the case.
Very interesting insight. What I'm wondering is what role should the consumer play in this? Because as you say, there is the cost premium. Perhaps this cost premium should be shared across different stakeholders, and certainly there might be some incentives for consumers to pay more for a green produced product, and there is also a need for transparency. And in the past, we have already seen some proposals, suggestions on how this can be achieved, how the consumer can be integrated in the system, for example, with some consumer levies. Katharina Seidler, I would like to ask you this question, because Dana has been working on this a lot, as far as I know. So what might be some regulatory approaches for the consumers? So maybe how can we integrate the consumer side in the system?
I think so. First of all, the question is, of course, who is the end consumer? Is this the industry, or is this the person who fuels his car at the fueling station? And then for the industry, you have, of course, voluntary options like the science-based targets, which would create an initiative to purchase green hydrogen. And then for the end user, there could be, for example, green labels being implemented, which also for heavy vehicle transportation, for example, which we also are aiming to work on, which creates an incentive for the end user. But also I want to address the previous question on could we start today, because there is not only can we look at this certification topic from the regulatory perspective, we can also look from the plan concept perspective, and there are already plan concepts which are ready to go today, and that would be a direct connection to the electricity source, which of course has to be green, and then a 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And I think today we also heard from Corinna, if you're keen on the methanization of the hydrogen, then you couple it with direct air capture, and then you're good to go.
Thank you. I see Corinna would like to react to this.
Just one more point on the refinancing, which is obviously a huge political discussion, but one more sector that Carina mentioned before, where this is a lot simpler than for other applications, is the aviation sector. And there we have already Germany going forward with the 2% quota of e-kerosene and all fuels bunkered within the EU by 2030. And this minimum quota sets a really strong incentives, and aviation sector will be able to pass this on to final consumers, at least in the early phases. With such a low quota, it will be prohibitive for flights yet, but it will set a small incentive. and we may, the Fit for 55 package, maybe even see a similar tool on the European level. And I think this is an interesting case because one, the refinancing is so clear and so simple because it can be passed on. And then two, another aspect is that this is a product that could be imported much more easily than other hydrogen derivatives or pure hydrogen, obviously. So for the import dimension, this is also a great case. But of course, the technology is not yet there on an industrial scale. So also something to really look out for. How is this going to develop? How quickly can we scale this up nationally, internationally, within the EU? And will the methanol route be certified within the next years or not? How long do we have to wait? So this is, I think, a key sector as well.
A key follow-up question on this. Aviation is a key sector and it is currently a very hot topic in Germany, but also in the EU. Do you think we might see a similar mandate for the shipping sector?
That's a tricky one. Well, crystal ball once again, but if I had to decide, my prediction would be that we probably won't see a similar mandate already in July. But this is speculation. Perhaps my fellow panelists have different opinions on this. The similar instrument for the aviation sector first. Maritime has some additional challenges, but perhaps you have other opinions. I'm a bit skeptical there.
Does anyone want to jump in on shipping? Any contradictory opinions to what Corinna just said? No, so shipping seems to be lagging behind, but I strongly hope that we will see some regulation for shipping in the next decade or even sooner as well. I have another question before I will moderate into our final discussion. And this question is again on imports. So imports really seem to be a key, a very intensely discussed topic today. And so the person is asking, how is certification handled or planned outside the EU? So I guess the question is also, are there any approaches already today to certifying hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives if imported from outside the EU? And are there any services provided by TÜV SÜD? Or maybe you're planning any services on this?
I can take on this one. We have good contacts to Saudi Arabia, and there are pilot projects at the moment. So for certain area, there's the plan to implement certification schemes on electricity as well as on hydrogen. And in these pilot projects, there are industries represented, like big electricity suppliers, but also TÜV SÜD as an independent third party who can give insights on the certification scheme. So we see that there's a close look to the European system and to get the connection to the European system to be in line with the regulations that are already existing there. And I mean, the question was specifically asked for Saudi Arabia. There are also projects in China, for example. China is also developing a standard, and we also saw in Chile that there are developings coming up. So all around the world, hydrogen is happening now.
This is a great message. This is also the message of our event today. And we have 15 minutes left. And I would like to use this 15 minutes remaining in our event for 2 questions. Maybe I can even, well, ask you to make your wish for 2 big events. So the first one is, of course, the July package. And I would like each of our panelists to formulate your recommendation for the July package. So what do you expect from the July package? What does it need to deliver to make hydrogen happen now? And the second one I will keep for later, but I would like to start with this question first. And well, who would like to start? Karina, would you like to open the round?
Yeah, sorry, I was not finding my mute button. Yes, sure. So I think for the July package, one key message that we're also developing together with the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition is to prioritize renewable hydrogen. So that is key, let's say, before any other, let's say, fossil hydrogen or decarbonized hydrogen for us, also for the European Green Hydrogen Acceleration Center. Clearly, we want to foster renewable hydrogen. That is one key. Then have, let's say, clear definitions of hydrogen. What is renewable hydrogen? What is green hydrogen? What is decarbonized hydrogen, etc. And develop a EU-wide certification system across all member states with an aligned guarantee of origin system. So maybe I'll leave it to that to leave space for the others as well. That are the key points.
Thanks a lot. Katharina Seiler, would you like to continue?
Yeah, so I would agree with Karina and say definitely the prioritization on the renewable hydrogen, and also not only to provide the sustainability criteria, which we definitely need, but also the verification method, how those should be proven in order to already start as soon as possible.
Great. Katharina Kocher, over to you.
Mm-hmm. So what would I expect from the July package to deliver to make hydrogen happen now, was the question. I would expect, I would favor the prioritization of finding international or on a European level valid standards and regulations for each country. So to be more flexible in the import of hydrogen, in the export of hydrogen, in the use of hydrogen, and also for the end operators, to make it a more flexible system to become hydrogen in the Europe, or to become hydrogen a global project, and not only a national project, but it has to become a global project.
Thank you. That's an interesting insight, because we were talking so much about consolidation and standardization, but then you also brought in the notion of flexibility. Corina.
Perhaps I can just add two small things to the wish list here. We're also going to see a revision of the EU ETS in July, and I think stringent criteria there are extremely important, but I won't go into detail. The other thing on my wish list is, as I said in one of my previous statements, an aviation quota that includes a sub-quota for e-kerosene on the European level. I think this would really make sense, and it would make sense now.
Great, thanks a lot. Paula.
So the last wish would be that in the area of certification, really the whole value chain is considered. We already talked about that before.
We lost Paula.
But that all transportation and different, yeah. Bad connection.
You're back. There was a problem with connection. Sorry.
Okay.
Perhaps you can repeat the last two sentences you said.
Not a good sign for my wish, huh, when connection breaks down. No, my wish was that in regard to certification, really the whole value chain is considered, so that transportation is fixed in the criteria, and also liquefaction, combustions, etc. So that would be important for us.
Thanks a lot. I see that we lost Katharina Seiler due to some connection problems, but I hope that she will join us before we end the final round of questions. And this final question is very important for me because we talked so much about imports today. And obviously, as Katharina Kocher just said, hydrogen needs to be a global project. It cannot be just the national project, and we need to collaborate between countries. We need to work together in order to really make it the global project. So this year we have COP26, where the head of states will come together to discuss again the climate protection. How can we reach Paris climate targets? How we can really ensure that these targets are reached. And so maybe the second wish I would like to formulate would be in regards to making hydrogen a global project. What would you like the COP26 to decide, to pass? What would you like the head of states to agree on? And this time I would like to start with Corina Jorling.
Thanks, Katharina. This is such a huge question. Perhaps just with regard to hydrogen, I think it would make sense if, with regard to global harmonization of standards, if this was part of the agenda in the context of hydrogen, because in the long term, and Katharina Kocher has also stressed this before, if we have, for example, more lenient criteria in other international stakeholders like Japan, for example, for green hydrogen than we have in the European Union, then we will obviously have a cannibalization of mutual imports. So addressing this and perhaps going towards an international standard or some agreement in that context would really make sense with regard to hydrogen. For all the rest of the topics, I will hand it on to my fellow panelists.
Okay, so this was already a very strategic wish. I would pass to Karina now.
Yeah, I think another point, so I fully agree with Corina on the standardization and harmonization of standardization, that is key. A second aspect could be to jointly co-develop emerging technologies, because if we really want to speed up this development and reach climate neutrality by 2050, we need to jointly work together. And there I'm thinking of, for example, LOHC technologies, but also electrolyzer scale up. There are so many, let's say, technological risks that still exist, and here international collaboration could really help to accelerate this.
Okay, thank you, Paula.
I'm totally happy that standardization is already mentioned by my co-panelists, because this is something we also always want to highlight. So really, really great. And yeah, what I maybe can add is that also on a sustainable finance area, there's a lot of things are happening, and in discussion which projects shall be featured. And my wish would be that we also get clear guidance in that regard fast, so that we don't have to consider a lot of different options, but that there's a clear guidance on what projects we can focus on.
This is a great recommendation, thinking about the discussions we had on sustainable finance within the EU. I imagine that getting it done on the global level would be a great challenge, but this is still something to formulate as a wish for COP26. Katharina, would you like to close this round of questions?
So as hydrogen experience already a great attraction, but is still at the beginning of what it will come. So currently a completely new market develops along the whole value chain. And I'm convinced that hydrogen technologies will change our world in a positive way. But at this meeting, at the COP26, consider also other technologies, because hydrogen can't make it alone. It also needs other technologies for develop a sustainable economy.
Well, I guess this is a great wish list, and I hope that some of what we discussed today and somewhat of what the panelists just expressed now, that it will find way into the policymaking process on the national level, on the European level, but maybe even on the international level. I thank you all, the audience, for staying with us for such a long time. I think we had some very great insights today, and I personally, I'm very amazed about the discussion we had. And once again, I would like to emphasize the fact that we had an all-female panel today. Would be great to know if we had any men in our audience, because I guess it doesn't matter which topic we take, we need to take care of the diversity, and especially with hydrogen, where we're starting something new, where we have this option of having a new beginning. I think this is a great opportunity also for us as society to work on this topic together. So I would like to thank all the panelists for the great discussion we had, for the great insights we received from you today. I would like to thank once again our audience for staying with us, for being very active in participating in the discussion. And yeah, feel free to provide us your feedback. For the female participants, feel free to join our LinkedIn group, to contact us if you have any ideas for cooperation, maybe for further projects and events where you would like to give voice to female experts. I thank you all, and yeah, wish you a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.